Alright, hello everybody. This is Feng again with this week's Design Cinema, and we're gonna do something a little bit different this week. We're gonna actually talk about the practice things that you could do to kind of prepare for this industry. Again, I'm gonna keep this quite casual because it's actually a holiday weekend coming up tomorrow here in Singapore, so I'm actually gonna travel over to Shanghai for a few days. Pretty much as soon as I finish this video, I'm jumping on an airplane. It's quite casual around the office here as well. I don't think there's anybody here. I'm sitting by myself in my office. So let's get started with this. And I still have a little bit of cough, so hopefully you guys bear with me as we go through these things. So if you hear some weird coffee noises, that's just me because I travel so much. It's hard to get some rest. Anyways, what we have here is a bunch of different images. Let's all cross our fingers that Photoshop don't crash because these are all PSD files, so I can show you some of the layers. But I have a couple of categories here loaded, and I'll talk about each thing and why they're important to practice. And this is geared mostly towards those of you who are trying to study and hopefully eventually go to a design school. Again, I'm not pumping my school here, but any school you want to go to, most of them, especially the high-end ones, such as my school or even Art Center, require some kind of entrance portfolio. They simply just don't let you in because you want to take it. They want to make sure that you are actually a designer and that you show a potential desire and passion for this line of work, and that your thinking, excuse me, thinking process is aligned to the design industry. So this is some examples of that, and we'll just jump right in. But before we start this, I'm going to something very clear is that you guys watching this most likely are heading into design industry, right? Even though we see on screen right now, all this kind of stuff is quote unquote artwork, it's not really. It's about understanding. And why don't we just jump into one of these, okay? So, for example, let's start this thing, okay? Here is a bunch of drawings of bugs. These are kind of things, excuse me, we assign to our students so they can understand not only how to draw well, but can also draw something from any angle. Because one day when you are working as a designer, after you get out of school, there's going to be no more images in front of you. Whereas these things, we have photo references to kind of borrow from. However, notice the way they're drawn is in a very kind of product view. They're all drawn in a three-quarter view. So this is kind of good stuff to practice for. I'll show you guys a few more. Here's a couple more. So you can see if I open up these files, I can actually flip them in reverse, and it doesn't make any difference to the drawing. That's always a good way to check, because if you draw them correctly in perspective, then it doesn't really matter what orientation. See, they can even be upside down, and nothing is really wrong with them in terms of does the drawing look right, correct or not, right? So why do we do all this kind of stuff? Why do we prepare? So the big thing is preparing your brain for the visual library, meaning the more information you have in your head of everything in this world, not only do you understand it, but you can understand it from a 3D point of view. For example, here's a baby elephant. Here is a, what do you call these things? A boar. But the way they're drawn is almost like low polygon, right? Like you see in games, built in very low poly. And the reason why we do that is because we're trying to teach students to understand these objects purely in a 3D form, that this is not an elephant you're looking at, this is not a boar. What you're looking at are 3D objects. So by practicing on different subject matters, the students have a very good understanding of 3D, of how objects are constructed, how objects are built. So if you're practicing at home, this thing you're seeing here is quite hard, obviously, because you have to know perspective. These are kind of things we teach you in the school, and something that you really, it's very hard to do on your own. It'll take you month and maybe years to practice, but at least draw stuff from an understanding point of view versus just drawing. See, like these airplanes, the elephants you saw, the bugs, notice they're all drawn from a three-quarter product view, which is down, right? Which is, let me get my red marker here. Pardon the slowness because there's so many PSD files open. Okay, it's drawn so you can see this view, drawn from this view. So even though these planes were referenced from real pictures of planes, they're not copies of a picture. And I'll get to that in a bit why, right? Because we're trying to teach students to understand. So even though the plane, maybe the this Fokker plane here from Germany, or World War I plane, looks like this in side view, we translate that and turn it into a three-quarter perspective to teach students, look, this is how objects look in 3D space, right? versus just copying a photograph. Which, let me just explain really quickly why that is. Okay. Let's hope Photoshop don't freak out. I'm doing some very big files here. Okay. When you have an object, I'll do this demo for you guys here. Okay. So here I'm drawing a very crappy version of a still life that most of us done. You know, when I went to art school and all those kind of places, even in high school, I remember doing this kind of stuff. Right? It's a typical still life. You got a stool with a background. Here's the floor with maybe like a carpet or something like, you know. I'm sure you guys all seen this before. And your job is to draw this down, right? So let's go to student number 1. Here's student number 1 with his board. Here's student number 2. Okay. Let me erase this out a little bit. Here's student number 3. Okay. And I'll show you guys a couple of approaches to this and why the way we train for industrial design is a little bit different. Okay, so first student, he could use the I'm just going to draw what I see method, which is the most common way of how most people draw. So they see that, they go, okay, I see this table, I see this thing, right? Drawing by eye. They could kind of raise their pencil up against this thing, put it back here, right? And go, okay, I see a bottle, I see a apple, and then I put the background. You know, so most people draw like this. I drew like this when I was in high school. Same thing, right? So that's student number 1. And then student number 2 goes, I'm going to use, my eyes are very good at recognizing shapes, so I'm going to use a negative approach, which is drawing the negative space of something to get the positive. So you can see me here drawing the negative space of this object. And by doing so, I could create a positive. Right. Something like that, like this, right? Something strange like this. This is a negative shape here. This will continue, right? You see how this kind of chair appears out of a negative thing, right? Something like this. And then from here, I can then extract. So that's number 2. Number 3 could say, hey, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a very tight grid. Very precise. Right, and named it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this is like A, B, C, D, whatever. And then I'm going to take myself a transparency grid. Let me put it here. Right, same grid on a transparency like a vellum or you know, a plastic sheet or whatever. And I have the same grid A, B, C. And then by doing a grid system, I could tell like, okay, on grid 5D, whatever, it's looks like that, right? So by doing this method, I could slowly reproduce this drawing purely on what's on each grid. I could even block out this entire thing in black and work on this section. It'll still be correct because I'm doing it piece by piece.